Hi there, it's the LIA Cast, the show where a couple visual storytellers get together, take a walk around a topic, a challenging topic, and pick it apart, look at it analytically from every conceivable angle, then try to walk away with some useful application of all of this thinking we do because we think hard about visual storytelling, so you will too. My name is Jersey Joe's cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
Hi, I'm Rob Stenzinger, designer and coder, and we have a special guest with us today.
I love it when we have special guests with us today. Who do we have with us today, Rob?
Kasey Van Hise. Welcome.
Oh, I love it when you have special guests too.
When it's
that
me.
means I get to come on.
I think this is the...
It's me!
Yay! Fourth time? Like one of the... she is now almost tied with Ryan Estrada for appearances on the Lean Into Art Cast.
All right.
I'll get you, Ryan. I'll get you.
Oh, yeah.
If you turn around, Ryan, you're just going to see Kasey's eyes without eyelids. It'll be the last thing you see.
Ooh.
Kasey Van Hise of webcomics fame, Winters in Lavelle, Parasite Nights.
Yes.
And but most recently, you've been involved in a game design project.
Yes, I am writing a game called Hustle Cat. I'm working with the studio Date Night on this, and we are kind of all banding our resources together to form a super band. A game that's they're called a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but I'm doing the writing portion of it.
And that's basically our topic today. Is like you're talking about working on this game and talking about what's called visual novels, what's commonly called visual novels.
Yes.
Yes. And we'll get into describing that in more detail and digging into the topic in more detail in a minute. But first, we have a system that we observe on this show where we warm up intellectual warm up exercise called the curveball. And Rob, I don't know if I have a curveball. Do you?
I always have my bag of tricks, and I have my empty bag next to my bag of tricks that sometimes causes this vacuum of maybe baloney comes out of my brain or perhaps something useful. And what's funny is like our conversation before, as we were getting set up to record, reminded me of something that I've been curious about that I'll happily share as a curveball, but I would not want to cut off Kasey, if you happen to have something,
I tried to come up.
It's our warm up. Yeah.
I tried to come up with one, but I my curveball was trying to come up with a curveball. So if you have one at the ready, then I will gladly accept that.
Totally cool. And what's fun about this is your mileage may vary, right? Where like I said, I'm making this up based on our conversation earlier. So right behind Jersey, there is a teddy bear holding a book that Kasey nicknamed it's the Hype Bear because it's there advertising Kasey's work.
Yeah, I can pull it up on the screen so everybody can see what he's talking about. Right over my shoulder.
Oh, it's my work! I actually didn't notice.
Yeah.
It's Winters in Lavelle.
Yeah. Oh, I should get my hype. I don't know where she went.
Your hype?
I have... Yeah, my hype curry.
and it's anytime the combination of like independent creator and marketing comes up, I think about a lot of times we run into sort of personal barriers or lack of maybe commonly being comfortable with that, right? So I wanted to throw out as a curveball with that as context, what do you do to sort of keep yourself in check with just admitting that you want to improve with being your own marketer and advocate, and how do you go about both noticing that and then doing something about it?
Oh, Kasey, I know you have strong feelings on this. We've had tens of conversations about this very topic, both in real life and on Twitter.
Yes, we definitely have. I think the first thing is to accept that there's no shame in being your own hype man or hype person. I think the first step is accepting that that's a job that you need to do as an independent creator. I think a lot of people really hope and that people want them to have somebody to do that for them, and unless you are working for a major publisher or something like that, you're not going to have that option at all. So just sort of accepting it as one of the pieces of being an artist is I think the most important part. And it's my personal pet peeve that it's not taught as part of art. Like, we did not have any marketing classes in college or anything like that, and that's infuriating to me. But at the time, you don't think about it. You think that you kind of buy into that stereotype of the whole where you have to do art for art's sake and you don't want to sell out and all of that, and that's nonsense because nobody else is held to that standard. Like, you don't do baking for baking's sake. Or, I mean, you kind of do. That's a bad example. But you know what I mean? Like, you don't go into accounting for the sake of going into accounting. You still have bills to pay.
Right. Well, this is slightly potentially divergent, but I'm going to round it off with a counterpoint to hit you with, Kasey. Actually, both of you, Kasey and Rob. But it's like another thing I get. There's a lot. I live in Ann Arbor, and University of Michigan's here so there's lots of opportunities to see interesting intellectual people talk about intellectual topics. So I go to a lot of talks, and every once in a while I'll see an artist who'll do a talk, and the talk is not very good. Their work is great, the thoughts behind the work is great, but their presentation skills are abysmal. And that nothing can ruin my interest in a topic than watch somebody fumble through notes and lose their place and stop for a full 30 seconds while they're going, hold on, wait. Oh, okay, I was going to say this, So marketing and presentation skills should be part of an art curriculum, I think. That's the divergent thing.
Yeah.
But come back at you. You said, okay, there's no shame in marketing yourself, right? That's your contention.
Yeah.
All right. I'm composing a tweet right now, Kasey, typing away, and I go, please, why won't somebody read my book? Read my comic, because it makes me sad when you don't read my comic, please. RT and follow LOL.
I see what you're doing here. I see. And that's... I can't believe you stole my tweet. But... Okay. I think that's all the more reason I wish there was more training in formal schools, and I guess for people who don't either choose to go to school or don't have the luxury of it.
That is.
I wish there were more reasons to.
Hey, Case, we're running into some latency issues, and like there's a lot of lag coming from your stream. I don't know, is anybody in the apartment streaming any video or anything like that, or downloading something big? Is something running?
No, I did check about that. Yeah. Okay. I think it might just be my connection, which is wonderful. So I'm sorry, I might turn into a pixel robot a couple of times here.
But you were saying, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not sure how much of that came through. But there is a very balance to strike there, and I think learning that is just as important as, and just as hard as learning perspective or learning anatomy or things like that. And it goes hand in hand with just how you present yourself in general. Like, you don't have to become a great panelist or somebody who goes on podcasts or things like that. Like, you don't necessarily have to go to that point, because I understand that that's not really what a lot of people want to do. I mean, I personally love it. I love talking in front of people, but I understand that that's not for everybody. But it's also a really careful, and I think a lot of it just comes through observing what other people do and what works for people, and not copying the things that don't work. I don't remember who made it, but somebody made a tweet the other day that really struck me, where they were talking about trying to collect business cards from, and somebody please tell me if you remember who this was, collecting business cards from young artists, and one of them was the artist's self-portrait of them with giant bags under their eyes and a huge to-do list that was out of control and spiraling off the page. And the person who tweeted it was like, "This, the only thing that's telling me is you can't manage your time very well. So maybe don't advertise yourself just as you would in any other aspect of your life, in how you want to be viewed as an artist and how you want to be taken professionally." I joke about it a lot on my Twitter. I think I made jokes today about how I talk about anime boys a lot, and that's not super professional. It's mind.
Didn't you actually make like a separate Twitter account for that kind of stuff too, though?
Yeah. I've got another, which, yeah, to say that you like keep it, you want to keep it at least reasonably professional.
Right. Like the expectation is that we're going to be human, and we're going to right. But yeah, like I think of the Seinfeld joke with George Costanza at his job. And he found out the secret to not having to do anything was just to always look flustered and flummoxed and frustrated, and just be like, every time somebody asks something of you, just go, oh, right? Like if that's your professional demeanor in attracting clients, yeah, that could be problematic, right, Rob?
Yeah, it's I think I'm soaking in a lot of the points that Kasey made, and it to me it adds up to you don't have to be all things marketing, but you really need to find to admit that there's a job to be done and to find a way to get it done. And I think also this is something I'm adding that tell me I did not take a traditional art course of study, but I'm pretty sure I've worked with a lot of people who have, that it's common to go through practicing critique, right? Self-critique and critiquing others.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty handy reusable skill, because
absolutely, yeah.
Once you're doing that, and you can use that to observe and refine your marketing approach, right?
Yeah.
So there's but it's a it is an interesting topic that puts you in the almost against the common myths, and I don't know why they're still common, but that somehow art can exist for art's sake, which is beautiful as a concept, but yet in a practical sense, there is a job to do to get your art into someone else's hands and whatnot. So worth examining and noticing, like, oh gosh, I am kind of an introvert. What can I do? Do I have friends that are extroverts, and can I pay them or whatever, right? But thinking it through and trying stuff out. So
just be pragmatic about it, really. I think understand what your strengths are, understand how you want to present yourself, and just lean into it. If you want to make bad puns on Twitter all day, people love that. You're gonna find people who
follow at Greliz, Greliz, for bad puns.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And like, just being professional on Twitter doesn't mean you have to be boring or be very much like, I had my coffee and then I made a comic.
Now you're reading my tweets.
Today, goodbye. Like, you don't necessarily.
I was instantly, when Kasey was describing that, was thinking of we're getting really bad latency. We'll let Kasey's bandwidth catch up. Hopefully.
Into a robot for a second.
All right, when that happens, Case, we're just going to plow on ahead, and you're just going to have to try to keep up with us, because thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, New
That's
York City
fine.
bandwidth. Anyway, I think we walked.
I know what's happening.
Yeah.
Awesome. Us too. And yeah, I mean, and you were setting us up to transition, I think, Jersey, because I think, yeah, what's funny is it was somehow we safely all swung at the same curveball, and we didn't hit each other, so that's good.
Next time.
And that's the signal for the transition when Rob makes the baseball metaphor for the curveball to explain what we just did. All right. With that, I'm going to cue the music because it's time to get 10,000 feet up and talk about the topic in abstract. Look at it from every conceivable angle, look for the hidden dimensions and depths, and in a general sense, overthink it. And then we'll come back in the second half to talk about how to put this stuff into practice. So, visual novels. Visual novels. I had the privilege of hanging out with Kasey last October in New York City when I was out there for New York Comic Con, and I will admit that I was completely unaware that visual novels were this phenomenon that was being enjoyed by so many people. And like when you explained the concept to me, Kasey, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And I was like, really? A lot of people like to do that? And then Kasey came back at me with this. Not only do a lot of people like to do it, or read these, or play or read these visual novels, but a lot of people get like really emotionally caught up in these things. And so I'm wondering if we could start with just an overview, because I'm sure there's a lot of people like me who just we're completely unaware of like what exactly it is and what is the phenomenon behind it, like what's the culture behind it, and then we can get into some examples, because there's a wonderful example that I can't wait to get at. But first, just a general sense, what do we mean when we say visual novel, Kasey?
Okay, so a visual novel is usually, there are a lot of variations on this. It's a very wide term, but the traditional sense of what you think of when the term comes up, or what most people who are familiar with it will think of, is a game with choices, not necessarily always. It could be just an interactive story. You are clicking through pages, and there is art on the screen to show you these characters as they're acting, and then there is text at the bottom to tell you what's happening. That's the very, 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 very basic version of it. I feel like everybody read these as a kid, but if you read books, these.
Your video's not coming up, Case, so I can't actually. Oh, I wonder if you need to shut your video off and turn it back on. I'm going to pull up one of the examples on my screen share while you do that, Kasey. There's an example of a visual novel.
So that is a visual novel, Jersey. I see a banner with kind of glowingly lit birds. And it looks kind of romantic.
Hatoful boyfriend, yes. Okay, so to get more specific with visual novels, many of them, not all, but the popular interpretation of them is to have a romantic sort of intent to it. So there are a lot of games where you interact with characters, you kind of pick up a persona, you act as as the main character, you interact with a cast of characters, and your choices will end you up in a romance with one of them, which will get you like exclusive scenes with that character, or they'll get you like a story that focuses on them and on your relationship with them. So what's on the screen right now is a game called Hatoful Boyfriend. Hato is Japanese for pigeon, and this is on Steam now. You can play it in English. It's wonderful. It's actually a very emotional story where you are the last human alive, and I think you live in a cave or something like that. That part doesn't matter. But you're the last human alive, and you go to a school full of human-sized pigeons. So you go to a private academy, and everybody around around you, and so you have to decide like who you want to spend your time with after school, if you want to join the music club, if you want to get close to the shy librarian pigeon, and all of them have sort of backstories that go with it. And this one became really popular. It was kind of a gag, also kind of serious, and it now has an official English release because it got so much traction behind it.
It's interesting. So it sounds like there is like something incredibly something that has just like sort of a surface parody thing to it. Doesn't typically resonate and build up like that.
Yeah.
Right? There's something deeper here going on. Like what are some of the things that you think are getting people pulled in and enjoying the medium so much to someone who hasn't really done much with it?
Yeah, this is an interesting first example. I think Hatoful got popular in the States because of the novelty of it, where we don't really have as strong of a tradition in the visual novel media as Japan does. So in Japan, this is kind of a parody of existing games, things like Tokimeki Memorial. Oh, geez, I know there are a million others like that where they're what are called dating sims, where you have to raise certain stats to be appealing to these characters, and things like that. But that's not necessarily what all of them are. So that's Hatoful Boyfriend is just a fun example, and ended up having a really compelling story behind it.
Okay,
and
so
that's really
the marketing. What's interesting, tying back to the curveball, it's like that project had some strongly built-in marketing. Like, so there's this novelty that's like, oh, I'm totally going to tell my friends about this. And then all of a sudden, I can't believe it. I'm loving this. And
then it's like, why am I crying? This pigeon made me cry. And that's one of the strong points of visual novels is because you have these branching story paths, and you don't have to tell one linear story. You can go through and take the time to focus on a character that wouldn't necessarily come up in the main story. So say you have an idea for a story, and I feel like this happens with everybody. This happens with me when I make comics, where there's a supporting cast character, and you develop them, and you work on their backstory to try to flesh them out. And then it's all that tip of the iceberg stuff where you only have a little bit of the character that you can actually show in the story because they're not part of the main plot. But you're so interested in what they have that you wish you could just take this time and take a look at them. So visual novels kind of give you a way to do that and to show a little bit of everybody. So you can say, have a cast of 10 people and only focus on one at a time, and then the player can choose who of them they want to focus on. So it's really exciting to me, all the different possibilities you can explore with a choice-based visual novel, or with interactive fiction in general, not necessarily just for this, but it's more of the standard. Some of the other examples, there are a lot of games that are similar to it, that are choice-based, that are out. Consoles. The consoles are really where we're seeing a lot of these, like the DS, the PlayStation Vita, things like that. There's the Zero Escape series, which is 999.
Let me pull that up.
I never remember which. Sure. And then Virtue's Last Reward are two of them, and they actually are. I have a slide that I was going to show to kind of discuss the different branching paths that you can use in visual novels, and it's actually from Virtue's Last Reward because the branching paths become part of the story itself, where you have to follow certain branches at certain times, and it sort of has a meta story that is based on you failing at certain things, hitting a dead end in one story point, and then sort of restarting and moving to another one. It builds into the meta story. And I think the potential for being able to tell a story like that with a bigger story involved and sort of working these choices in is really exciting. So that's a really good example of one in particular. And if I Let me just pull this up here real quick.
Yeah, we can see if you could do,
So
if you
this-
could do a screen share at least.
Sure.
Not getting any video from you still, but
Oh, you're still not getting anything. Okay.
We're
I'm
getting
just going to
voice,
screen share
though.
the whole. Oh, okay. Good. I'll just screen share the whole time then. So this is actually a screenshot from Virtue's Last Reward. If you can see my screen.
Not yet. Let's see. Oh no! It says you're screen sharing, but we're not.
Oh,
Rob,
no!
Are you seeing anything, Rob?
No, I'm not seeing anything yet.
Oh, bum out.
Oh no.
Well, we can. Well, this is a. Let's see. Well, we do have other visual
put it-
examples. We can use.
Okay.
Is this a public presentation or is it private? Because maybe Jersey could get to it.
Yeah.
I could share it real quick. Yeah, let me get that for you. Cool. Doing it live.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
let me
I'm
get-
finding it really really impressive, and also it's almost nostalgic too when I'm seeing this genre coming at it from someone who's played through a few generations of video gaming. It reminds me of some of the sort of like King's Quest, right? Or like it's not like it's having an emphasis on that much interaction, but just a little bit of interaction and like some story within the juxtaposed with this like a scene or a setting. But there's definitely more refinement in this current example, but it does remind me of like elements of games, games of the past that were very compelling on their own, even with not as rendered graphics from these look like there's the artwork has taken likely maybe a couple dozen hours or more to get that, like a cool painted background and then a really detailed primary actor in front, but then they're swappable and whatnot, and there's all sorts of new flourishes on top of that, but the old format of essentially putting some of course storybook, right, even predating like Apple II games, but it's it makes sense in a way to me that there is so much here, but then when you think about a lot of interactive entertainment, this isn't typically the thing that comes to mind, right? Stories, and so much emphasis on prose inside like a game experience. But how are we doing on the presentation?
Got it.
Sweet.
Okay, you don't need the whole thing. This is actually I was just going to go through. There should be a slide called plotting, and that's just the choice tree that I was going to show you, and it's directly from the game, but it's also a method that you would use to develop a visual novel if you're going to have one that has branching paths to it. So this is actually from Virtue's Last Reward. This is something you can hop between the choices within the story itself. So you'll go through, you'll hit a certain point, you get to a dead end, and then you have to start over from a different area and kind of hit the same story from a different angle. So you'd say like, well, what if I hadn't let that guy die, or like, well, what if I didn't do this at this point? And so it's not only an example for here, but it's also the backbone for like any interactive branching story that you would do.
That looks like a lot of work, Kasey.
It
That's
is
right.
a lot of work. Outlining a visual novel with choices is exhausting. It's actually it's pretty exciting though, because you get to choose the structure of it, and one of the cool things is one of the things that I'm noticing kind of come out now is you can kind of see the shape of the story when you're outlining it, and drawing out diagrams like that. I know some people will use. I'll get them for the show notes later. I know there are programs that you can use for it. I personally didn't like any of them. I ended up just doing it on paper. I know people who just use whiteboards and things like that, and it's just, this is your first step in going through, and it's exciting to me because you can see a shape come out. So sometimes you'll end up with these branching trees like you see here. Sometimes you have a big spider web where you have this giant circle in the middle, and then all these pieces sort of coming off the sides. I'm gesturing, but you still can't see my screen. I'm sorry.
That's right. You're giving us the audio experience too, right? So
yeah,
we got a good number of people who just listen to the audio podcast. So
that's true. That's true. So I'll keep narrating like I'm on an old-timey radio show. And again, I'm really sorry for the connection issues that I'm having here.
You know what? It's still, we're having a live video chat conference that we're streaming live and recording live on the internet. That is nothing short of miraculous for this kid who grew up in the 30 years ago, 80s time when walkie-talkies were considered magic.
Yeah, we're not playing chess by letter here, so.
Exactly. So no, this is still great.
Okay.
I have a question though.
Sure.
So this you're describing different shapes that have come out that you've noticed. Have you noticed that the different shapes have a kind of different a different emotional arc associated with them? So like would a circular story lead to something peaceful, or would it be inherently thematically prone to causing despair because it's repetitious? I don't know. Like, is there like emotion in the shapes?
That's a really good question. I can't say I've noticed anything. I haven't quite gone through an. Oh, sorry. There's just some really fun writing examples in here of games that either are visual novels or are not. I think it's more the structure of the story itself than it is the tone of the story that you get through the shape of it here. Where I'm thinking of a friend of mine is developing a story, and hers does have sort of a circular shape, or theirs. I'm sorry, theirs has a circular shape to it, and it does sort of have a sort of a circular tragic nature to it until you break out of that. So I think it is very possible. Like Hustle Cat is very, very linear in comparison. It sort of branches at the bottom, and I think it's more. Yeah, I'd say it's more straightforward, more lighthearted, I guess, but it doesn't necessarily have to determine the tone of the story itself. You could have a story that only branches off once, and it could be the most beautiful, gentle story about first love, or it could be like a story about aliens destroying the world. And so the shape of it doesn't really, I think, come into the tone. But it could, if you consciously make it part of the gameplay, I think it could. And it depends on how much. And I guess it's the same as anything. I guess it's how much you want to take the format or the media into a meta context, and use that as part of it. Which
I'm reminded of an article I read. This is like a decade ago, and it was when the Metroid Prime games were still big. And I remember reading they were describing how they wrote the game, and they said, well, we write the one correct path first, and then we write the branches off of that. And I remember that struck me as like, oh, it really is that simple. That's a simple way of approaching it for something that feels like a real world that I could just navigate through and go wherever I want in. But Metroid is a game where there really is only one correct path, right? You can't open this door until you get the right power-up or right weapon or right suit.
Yeah.
Whereas the difference here, what you're describing is you can create divergent paths that lead to different kinds of developments, and all of them are valid, all based on user input. And the amount of complexity is up to you, the author, right?
Yeah, and a lot of them, I mean, just for the sake of keeping the writing fairly simple, or not having it go on for too long, have less choices, and that's perfectly valid. I think sometimes people get hung up in the amount of choices that you can be given or things like that, but I think you can tell, you could choose to tell 6 completely different stories, or you can choose to tell one story that has six very minor divergent points or something like that. So you could follow the Metroid example, or you could write 3 separate novels and put them together, and have them sort of diverge at different points. But that's a lot of writing, and that's something that it's really easy to get caught up and get kind of intoxicated in the idea of how many choices you can do, but you still have to write them all. So that's something that I got caught up in kind of at first, and then when I realized I had to write all of those choices that I was planning out, my tree branches got pruned a bit. So, and that's something that in future projects I might be more ambitious with, but for now, I gotta learn how to climb the tree first.
Okay, so but what I'm hearing is you're not creating like discrete instances of story that can be moved around here and there and be reused many times over, right? Like you're creating like direct paths when you're doing it. What I'm saying is like because like when I was looking at visual novels and I was doing my research for the show, I was like, I wonder if there's like a moment where it's like, oh, this character is disappointed in you, and I want to get as much mileage out of this art as possible. So I'm going to have this moment be, if you make this choice, it'll pull up that scene. If you make that choice, it'll pull up that scene. There's like 12 different points where this scene could be reused for a different divergent path and story, but you're not doing it that way, right?
I'm not personally. I think what's more common is, a term I hear used a lot is common root, where what you'll do is, and I've seen this in a lot of the games that I've played, and it's also something that is kind of working into HustleCat, is you write a common story where it has less in terms of branching points, so you can kind of reuse those assets, and it's not like you can move scenes in and out throughout it. It's more like you'll go through on a straight path, and then you'll get a point where you can kind of diverge a little bit, but then you'll go back to that main path, and you'll sort of continue down that line with bits of pieces that kind of arc off depending on choices that you've made. And that can be another choice you make. You can choose to have an immediate response from that. You can choose to have delayed responses with that. Something you can do is set up like a point system, and I think a lot of games will do that, where I feel like this is the best example I can think of isn't really a visual novel, but like the games that are made by BioWare, like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, where you end up as like a hero or a renegade, and you can make options that are like, or you can make choices that will sort of put you towards that, and then that sort of tallies at the end, and then it gives you something different because of the choices that you've made throughout it, but it's sort of on a continuum there, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, and people should read about Dragon Age if you haven't heard about it. If you've been on Tumblr, you've heard about Dragon Age, but I've had the game described to me because I don't have time to play it. I wish I did, and it just sounds so complex. Not complex to play, but complex in terms of what actually happens based on your input in the game. Not just about simple leveling up, like, no, you're stronger. Like, you can make real choices that have a profound effect on how other people treat you in the game, and how, like, what your role in the game will ultimately be. And how they've taken it to another level where when you get the new Dragon Age, you can import, as I understand it, you can import data from your previous Dragon Age games into this game.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's crazy pants.
Yeah. It's really great. And I know a lot of people. A friend of mine, Amanda Cosmos, actually, is like personally on a quest to try to get a visual novel version of it, because there are so many choices, which I am fully behind. I will sign that petition, and because it would be a lot easier if you had an option to go through without all that gameplay getting in the way, you know? It has such a rich...
You just want to get to the shipping.
Well, sometimes you do. Sometimes you want to see all the other options. When you have all these character options, then these interactions that you'll never see in your game, and you're playing an 80-hour game, sometimes you want to have an option that isn't just like look up the scene on YouTube. So that's a big argument, I think, for it too. And there's a lot of games now that are going more narrative heavy and just telling a story that you can make choices in rather than saying like, oh, but now you have to beat the boss too. And that's actually my problem with Dragon Age right now. I'm stuck at a boss, and I just want to see the story. I just want to get married to my elf boyfriend, and I can't because I'm stuck at this boss because I'm bad at games and I don't have the time for that.
I just want to get married to my elf boyfriend.
Seriously.
Okay,
it's interesting because yeah, I mean, I wonder if the stress of playing too, because actually I have solved the Mass Effect series, so I have not actually played Dragon Age. I'm excited to do it someday, but it's one of those things where I barely made time to solve Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
But but now all of a sudden I'm getting bigger resonance and empathy the more and more we keep talking about this. Not that I was thinking, oh, this is some other weirdly world, but like it was always intriguing, and I'm like, why is it so darn interesting? Other than like, yeah, I think all these elements are pretty cool. It looks like a neat art form. But now, reminding me of that, well, it's just like playing Mass Effect without all the gameplay. And then thinking of things of like, well, would I have... Then I'm having all this remembrance of, oh gosh, what was the scientist? I killed the scientist guy, and I'm haunted by it.
Yeah.
Well, and I didn't kill him directly. I made him so sad he died, right?
Yeah.
And that's worse.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm like, oh no, this medium, this is awesome. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm getting it. I'm getting it. I'm excited.
Okay. So we got there. Yeah, and it really has a way to resonate with you, I think, and I think there's something there. It's just that perfect combination of everything that you can get together, because you have art working with you, you have prose, you have music, you have special effects. You can use everything possible in your arsenal to tell a story. You're not limited with one thing. You can actually use. Yeah, music is something that I'm very excited for personally, and has kind of wrecked me in playing visual novels, where a very, very good song will come on at a really dramatic time, and it just sort of like keys it up just enough that it really, really gets you involved in this in the moment. And then there's like cinematic effects. It's like a little bit of everything. It's like a little bit of every storytelling form coming together. You can use tricks from anything. Like I use my knowledge in writing comics in approaching writing this too, but I'm also studying playwriting, I'm studying screenwriting. We have the art, we have some really heavy programming aspects of it too.
Awesome. You're anticipating where I wanted to go, Kasey, because I have a rather squishy question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you're writing this thing.
Yeah.
And it's largely, what I'm hearing is you're talking a lot about decision points, like interpreting where the decision points will happen, or anticipating where the decision points will happen, so as to create interactivity and to change direction in the game.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of experience writing comics, and you're taking that experience along with studies in other fields for this game.
Yeah.
The squishy question is, how has writing with decision points in mind changed the way you think about writing or your approach to writing? Has it changed? Or is it just a simple switch that gets flipped? Like, well, now you just got to think about like plot points as decision points. That's all.
I do sort of think of plot points as decision points. It kind of just opened a new world for me. I feel like everybody who's written has probably had that moment where you write a scene up to a certain point, and then you don't know how the character is going to react. You have two ideas, and you say, well, if this happens, then I have to explore the consequences. It's going to change the story this way. But if the main character decides to be a jerk and says something else, then it's also going to affect the story in a different way. And it was really freeing to say, like, I can do both of those. Why not? So a lot of choices I've done, and they could be things that affect the story in a very, very minor way, but you have that freedom now where it's almost tough to go back when you are writing something more linear, like going back to writing a comic or anything like that, and say, well, I gotta choose one of these. I really have to commit to this one, and kind of just go forward with it. So it's, but at the same time, it makes you think about consequences more in general. So I think it would help you to choose the most impactful one in your storytelling. So if I were to go back and write a comic now, after writing 1 or 2 visual novels, I think I would be able to pick the choice that was going to be the most interesting, because I've already sort of I'm training myself to look at the possibilities at different areas of it, so I can say, well, I could have done this, and then you can kind of quickly sort of prototype it for yourself and say, like, well, then this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen. But then having the flexibility to say, or I could do this, and then this happens, and I think this is going to be a lot more compelling as a story. I think it's sort of made me think about that a lot more than I used to, where I've had epiphanies like that after I wrote the scene and it's been published. So it's up on my website, and I'm like, oh, I probably could have done this to really pull the drama. I could have made this play out a little bit differently, or I could have had the same effect. But and I'm hoping, at least for future projects, it will make me think about that sooner rather than very late in the process when you're almost done, or you're already done, or you have the book in your hands and you're thinking, if only I had tried this part.
Well, yeah, like this is reminding me of something that I'm trying to be a lot more aware of myself with the webcomic I'm working on now, is how can I keep my eye open for moments where the characters' decisions and actions change the plot rather than having the plot act on the characters.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of having just events constantly being thrown at them and them reacting and responding to them, how can I set up situations where the character chooses to do something which changes the whole situation for everybody else? Right?
Yeah, that's a good point too, because if you are writing your interactive story based on completely passive events, then that's not going to be very satisfying for the player or the reader. If it's like a bunch of rocks fall down on this path, or maybe some water comes across the way, like, that's not you. Who cares if you're making that choice? You want to be able.
That's Oregon Trail.
Yeah, basically.
Which was a great game, but I mean, there was some decision points in Oregon Trail, but there was also like, a band of bandits came upon you, circle of wagons. Yeah, and it's not as fun if it's not something like, and Oregon Trail had some choices that you had to make too, like whether or not you're going to ford the river.
What about so that, like, randomality? So how much you mentioned so many things that get mixed in here, and inherently perhaps a little bit of gameplay, right? Where you mentioned art, prose, music, effects, cinematography, but then a little bit of gameplay all of a sudden. Maybe I could see it being tempting to say, hey, maybe I want to have random dysentery, just like Oregon Trail in my graphic novel. In my
random dysentery,
or maybe not, but randomality, right? Where somehow, hey, it spices things up. But
random dysentery does spice things up. I'm sorry, I just can't get away from that expression.
Well, I mean, I think there is a possibility for variables in your story. I think for the type of thing I'm doing, that sounds like a nightmare to me, because I don't know how I would implement that into something. Because what I do is very narrative based. It's very, very story based. It's basically a novel. But I think if you were working in something that was more flexible, I think this might be a good thing where Twine might come in handy. Twine being another interactive storytelling tool. There are a lot of really, really good games on Twine. I've only played like 2 of them, but there are some really, really good text-based games that do use variables. They use things in them, and that will affect what happens in certain ways, I think. I can't speak to that as intelligently because that's not an area that I've really explored as much, but it is a possibility. It's more in things that are that have more game elements to them, though, than So if you have like a stat building, if you have like stats associated with it, I think then you would be able to use more randomality.
Yeah, and exactly. I was wondering if it's sort of like hung out there, like a tempting thing to do in the medium, where it's like, oh, I wonder if I'll get, I don't know, more. It just seems enticing, like a shiny technique, and I was curious if that.
From a writing angle, that scares me because I would have to still write out the consequences of all of those things. I think from a coding angle, that would be very exciting. But yeah, the idea of trying to consider writing all of that when these things get long enough is scary to me. So I can't speak to that as intelligently.
No, and it sounds like I mean, as you said, the emphasis of what you're creating is well, it's a narrative, and inherently randomality works against narrative overall.
Yeah.
That at least narrative controlled by you, like an author who has an intent of like, I will really want you to feel this emotion or this pain of this choice, that kind of thing. Huh.
Yeah, but that's a balance too, because I remember the first time I ran a role-playing game where I was GMing, and I had a very specific path I wanted everybody to go on because I had spent all this time constructing this tale, right?
Yeah.
And everybody had a terrible time. They were like, and they were all very pleasant about it. I mean, even though they were teenagers, they're like, "Oh, it's all right." I'm like, "Oh, nobody was happy." And then I did my next campaign. I had like 15 different divergent paths I could go on, and I was ready to improvise. Like, okay, well, you didn't go there. Well, we're going to go here now. I'm going to have to make something up. Obviously, you can't do that in a visual novel, but when I gave them more room for choice and I, made affordances for that, then suddenly I had a really successful campaign. Right?
Yeah. It really depends on. I feel like I'm trying to remember. I feel like I have seen some examples of like randomly or procedurally generated stories, but I'm really, really failing to come up with them right now.
Well,
but
how about this? Because I kind of wanted to make sure that we had time to hit on some of the design elements of this. Is it cool if I pull up the Hustle Cat demo while we talk
absolutely.
about designing?
Please do.
Because I want to look at some of this gorgeous art, if that's okay with anyone else.
Yeah. Art courtesy of Lindsay, a.k.a. Avia, who works on Parasite Nights with me. She will be doing all of the art for Hustle Cat.
That is cool. I had the privilege of playing this demo earlier as well, and it's beautiful.
Thank you. I will. I'll make sure to pass that along as well. Yeah, she did the backgrounds as well here, which is kind of nice too, because I'm real bad at those.
Well, and like here's the other things. Like Lindsay had to do like a full real floor plan for this place because as we'll see in a moment after this pan here, we're going to go upstairs and see a whole different part of the cafe that we can see, but now we're going to go up those stairs and we're in a different part of the room. We make our way up to the second floor balcony, which, except for us, is only occupied by those amazing looking cakes in the display case. Those are amazing looking cakes.
Yeah, aren't they though? And this kind of reminds me, it's something you can very easily make a visual novel on your own. There are a lot of engines out there that'll help you. If you were an artist, you could draw your own assets. You could write your own script. There's plenty of walkthroughs to help you put these together. If you're working with a team, please talk to the team about what's going into it. And also, if you're the writer, make sure you get your assets because then you can avoid that comic book fallout, that thing like you get in really old comic books that's like Superman punches a guy and it's a picture of Superman punching.
Right. Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of visual novels do that, and it drives me up the wall because that's like one of the that's a comics 101, and I'm like, please just learn that lesson if you're going into this. And so the temptation is there when you're writing to say like, oh, this guy had one blue eye and one orange eye, and you don't really need to explain that because he's sitting there and you can see him. So it forces you to kind of focus on different aspects of the writing and explain things that you wouldn't normally get from a still image.
Like the interviewee's point of view on this.
Yeah.
Graves sits with this sort of grim pomp, like he's sitting in a skull throne and a raven's going to land on his shoulder at any time. It's not just telling us about how Graves comes across, it's also telling us about how our main character interprets things.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of echoes something we said in the last episode with Zach Giolongo, is you want the words and the pictures to add up to something more than they are on their own.
Yes. Yeah, and that's something...
I want to go here real quick, what I just clicked on. So I just read this paragraph, for those who are listening in the audio. Graves sits with this sort of grim pomp, like he's sitting in a skull throne and a raven's going to land on his shoulder at any time. That was the end of the sentence. But then I click forward on it, and then suddenly another sentence pops up in there. Maybe it's more like he's about to roll a die with a lot of sides. Again, giving us information about the characters. But what I love about this is playing with pacing. You're making a second click because there was a pause between those two thoughts, even though it's one complete paragraph of thought.
Uh-huh, and I love being able to do that. One thing, and this is like one of my dream goals. Oh, and yeah, that's the last offend. There are some games from the kind of big names in Japan that do visual novels. There's one in particular I did see where the character art would change based on where the voice actor was reading the line. So they would get to a certain word in the line, and the asset would change to have a different expression. So you had these micro expressions that were coming up. So somebody would get mad in the middle of a sentence, and the art, like you see the portrait shows up for the character there. The portrait would show up, and it would be like a neutral face, and then they would get mad in the middle of the sentence, and then their art would change as the voice actor was speaking as they got to that line. And I'm like, I want that someday, but that's not the kind of thing that you can pace by reading, because for this, like we can do so much with it. But you're still kind of beholden to the pace of the reader. But if you have somebody who's voice acting, which that's something I didn't talk about here because that's like some pie in the sky stuff for me, voice acting, you can determine the pace even further by having the person actually reading the lines there. So if you set it up so that they're going based on that, pacing-wise, you can really pull some things out. And you can really do some exciting stuff. I'm really excited about visual novels. I'm sorry, I started talking really fast.
No. Yeah, you're reminding me too. Is that when I did play Mass Effect, I turned on subtitles, and that experience, it's Mass Effect would be a little more of a extreme level of fidelity because it's fully animated and whatnot. But like just picturing that without the animation, yet still the voice acting and the subtitles, basically. That's getting in the neighborhood of like darn close neighborhood.
Yeah.
Decision point. Here we go. So Graves asked, "What's your favorite breed of cat?" Cats that look like they're wearing tuxedos. I don't know. Tabby. Those cats with the stumpy little tails. Maine Coon. Siamese. What do I choose? I'll say cats that look like they're wearing tuxedos because animals and people clothes, always.
Yes.
Do you know any other languages? How about ciphers? And then I click to get my decision point. No. Or I speak the language of dance. And then I don't know what this last one is.
Oh, it says, no, I don't, in Japanese.
I'll say I speak the language of dance. And what marine animal would you say best represents you? Oh, boy. Dolphin, orca, shark, penguin, butterfly. Rob, decide what sea animal represents me.
Oh, let's see. Jersey? Interesting. I mean, this is tough. You really are a friendly dolphin, Jersey.
Okay. I was hoping you'd say dolphin and not penguin.
Yep.
And then what genre of music would you use to describe your work ethic? All right. Classically hardworking, children's sing-along, chip tunes, and punk. I'm not dead, just resting. Classically hardworking. On a scale from 1 to 10, rate me as an interviewer. 1 or like a 7.5 or perfect 10. I'm uncomfortable by this, man, so I'm going to say like a 7.5. Draculas or teenaged wolves? Draculas. Doy. Just kidding with that last one. Oh. Okay, so this is feeding data into the game that's
Yes.
going to change the way my experience is in it, right?
Yes, yeah.
Pretty cool.
Most of the choices in this won't be as rapid fire as that. This is kind of a special section, which is why we picked it as the demo. But it's yeah, each of those choices does kind of do something there.
It changes
And you don't
the
really
outcome.
get the full. Yeah, and since this is a demo, it's not as it's not branching out into that as much here, but in the full version of the game, it does.
This has different text than when I played it, though. This part, or am I?
Oh yeah, that's right.
This is different.
That does show.
Yeah, I rated him a 1. Muhaha.
Oh, really?
Yep.
And that changes the outcome, huh? Oh.
Or something. I don't know what it was because I was a penguin. I rated him a 1. And I forget the other choices. So yeah, we did make the same choices, and I did get a different result.
See?
Okay.
See?
Question.
Yes.
So I noticed that there was some playing with zooms, and I'm noticing that there's like assets that change and other assets that don't change. So,
Yes.
organizational, logistical kind of thing. How are you thinking about assembling assets for this? Like, is poor Lindsay having to paint these gigantic murals of this cat cafe so that you can zoom in tight and pull out far? And all these things?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, wow.
All of the assets are double-sized. All the background assets are double-sized, and you compose this on layers. So you'll have like the background layer, you'll have the character layer, you'll have the portrait layer. You can go even further, and we learned a lot by literally pulling other games apart and looking at their assets. You can have a facial expression layer where it'll have just a blank-faced character underneath it, and then you're just laying the face on top. So it's kind of like animation, where you have these cells that are laying on top of each other, and depending on what you want to do with some of them, in order to be able to do zooms, our backgrounds are bigger. Even though you only see Avery in the corner there as a little portrait, we have a full-sized Avery for other use. So you can zoom out, zoom in, things like that. So that's something, just work bigger than you plan to use, and that way you can do a lot of neat tricks with it. As far as your coding or your programmer's coding or the program that you're using to compile it can handle. But I've seen a lot of really, really neat things be done with that, and it's as simple as having really, really, really large assets. So you can have like this right here is we have Graves on the screen right here. It's sort of unchanging. It's what's called an event CG usually. So it's a special picture. It was painted just to be this. So what we could have done with that too is if we wanted to zoom in on something for it, made it really detailed and really, really, really high resolution so that you could say we needed to zoom in on his hand for some reason. If you really needed to see his rings or something like that, you would be able to just compose a shot as a close-up of that. And you've already got the asset you drew once. That way you don't have to do an entirely new one. If you make it big enough, you can kind of go from aspect to aspect for that. But for the most part, it's set as, like you see the background here, and then you'll get the character asset on top.
Mm-hmm.
And,
okay. So yeah, like thinking about it like the way if you think of like classic animation. Then...
Yes. Yeah. And then if you need, then that would be another layer as well.
And yeah, there's one of those layers in action.
Yep. Yeah. So a character layer comes up and goes on top of the background layer.
Okay. Question. I'm trying to get my video back. There we go. how are you thinking in terms of interface design? Because like I think about like, okay, well this is kind of like a self-contained webcomic in a significant way in that
Hmm.
it is a packaged app-like experience with content embedded within it, right? And
Yeah.
like, when I think of webcomic designs, if you go to any webcomic, everybody's got their own interface design, their own, UI
Yeah.
for like the forward and back buttons, and sometimes those forward and back buttons can be design elements. Like if I'm not mistaken, Casey, early days
Hmm.
in Winters and Lavelle, the
Yeah.
forward and back buttons were leaves, right?
Yes. Yep.
Ah, see, good memory.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, are those conversations that you guys are having, like, in terms of like, what's
Oh
the
yeah.
approach that you guys come up with for, like, how are we going to do the interface with this thing? Is it going to be simple tap on the screen to go forward? What's going to be? Where's the navigation going to happen? And like, how do you design? Like, how do you think about designing that and integrating it into the experience so that it feels cohesive?
It's I feel like considering the UI for this is very much like the way that you consider sound effects in your comics, where you want it to integrate well. You want it to be something that works with the theme of it. You don't want it to stand out. If you're doing a good job, it's something that people probably won't notice necessarily. We also want it to be something that's on theme. You don't want it to be too big and distracting, but you also want it to sort of fit. Like we don't want like a Windows 95 box popping up with some text in it. Uh, we'll have something cafe themed for this, whereas for Date Night To's other project, Starfighter, right now, it's going to be more like sci-fi in appearance. Like you wouldn't want to just use the same one for every project. So it's very much like just consider the aesthetic of the story and then kind of go from there. And I think that's an important thing to consider. I think there are some really fun things you can do with it. I've seen some really nice UI in games, and I've seen some really, really terrible, terrible UI in some of these games. Usually in the older ones, where you can tell that that was not a priority. Um, and yeah, it really depends. I know that if you use like RenPy is one of the big uh, uh,
Engine?
things.
Yeah.
For engines, thank you. I'm sorry. One of the big engines you can use to make visual novels, and it does have some preset UI. It has some existing not word balloons. Uh,
Text panel kind of thing.
yeah, dialog boxes that you can set up. It has sort of a template that you can use for it. So if you're starting out and if you don't want to worry about that, that's definitely something you can just use from out of the box. But it just like you could go to any website, like any webcomic hosting site, and just sort of use their out of the box solution for it, and you've got a site, but then your site looks like everybody else's site. So it's just that nice little extra touch you can do to kind of personalize it. But you still want to consider making it usable. There's a lot of little things about like guiding the eye with the UI in the same way that you would on a comics page. Making sure that it indicates that you need to click to continue when the text is done. Having some way to either you fill the text on the screen, and then once it's done, you have like a blinking light at the end that shows that you need to click for more, or something like that. And there are just like little
Yeah.
considerations like that. That's
Like I got Hatofel boyfriend back up, and like there's a little hovering thing, right? Like right at the end of the text, there's this little hovering thing that says like it's basically dancing to say like click me, click me, click me. So then I tap it,
Yeah.
and then there's a little bouncing arrow, click me, click me, click me, right? But
Yeah.
it's not obtrusive. It's not like bright orange punch the monkey 1990s internet stuff. It's very subdued.
Yeah. You don't need to go too extreme with it. It's just you just need something little to kind of guide the player along.
I gotta think this is stuff that you've been tackling in past projects, Rob. I mean, as a game designer, right?
Yeah, and certainly some of this is familiar territory. One of the game project that got me into, well, it was through a game project that I got into the visual language of comics because we were using it so much. Yeah, it was a game called Genhanu that it never got released. We had a demo that was actually in the Indie Game Festival in 2004. Didn't make it to the final rounds. But yeah, it was a lot of this is reminding me of that, like having your own, having your aesthetic that's kind of reinforcing, keeping the reader into the world. You don't want to have something that's disharmonious or like that doesn't make sense with the takes them out of the story kind of thing. That's all. Yeah, I mean that's just paraphrasing the kinds of things Kasey was advising. One thing, let's see, that. No, it is. I mean, it's all the choices you make are going to result in whatever kind of interface and content you put in front of your user, reader, player, and they matter. So it's worth thinking about it. Like I noticed in the Hatoful boyfriend. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that.
No, that's fine. It's Hatoful.
Hatoful. Okay. They had they had a subtle cue where there was a difference between the text is going to continue cue versus the text is about to lead to a new sort of page where now a different actor's coming in, and that was very interesting. But then both were really like a continuation symbol that indicated they behaved in a similar way, even though they looked different. So it was kind of reinforcing of like, well, what can I expect as a player and whatnot, and someone who needs to interact with this content in order to be able to consume it. So you end up, I think, having the chance to wear a pretty fun hat, which is the interactive aspect of the visual design that helps you present your story.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of storytelling you can do in the UI itself too, and that's a really exciting angle. That it's like you could get very infinite canvas about it, I guess. But it does remind me of some of the choices that you can make in using your website as a storytelling device for your comic. And I think that's something that you can have a lot of fun with. But you don't necessarily have to. Like, you could also make it that's something that's purely functional, and that's an option that you have in this too. It's just another tool at your disposal.
Totally. There's no shame in starting out with a WordPress template to just get your comic out there, right?
Oh yeah.
Or I'm glad you mentioned, Kasey, the RenPy. There was another leaner, and it's killing me. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, and maybe she can chime in the chat if she happens to come across this. But I know, like, we've been introduced to RenPy in the past, Jersey, and I can't remember who.
Really?
Wait. Oh, nope.
What?
It's killing me. I can't. It'll come out. All right. Let's keep going. I will look it up behind the scenes. But,
and it sounds like we're almost getting to on the ground stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm also reminded of, I mean, all of this discussion about like
Ashley Knapp.
Was it? Oh, of course, it was Ashley Knapp.
Yep.
Who else would it be? Ashley Knapp, who, like, every time we do an episode, I hear this beeping noise, and it's a dump truck full of really great insights and resources being dumped onto our lawn, courtesy of Ashley Knapp Industries. Control-Alt-Leave on the Twitters. But I'm reminded also of, I mean, like, you talk about, like, this infinite canvas stuff. I remember in, like, 2002, 2001, when McLeod did his Zot online comic to sort of demonstrate the potential of webcomics. Do you remember that case?
I actually never saw that online.
I'm going to pull it up.
All right.
Because, like, I'm jumping to the last chapter, but he did this really interesting thing with the narrative being bridged together with, like, sort of like cables, I guess. Let me make sure I'm presenting it properly. So, like, as the story's concluding, we're watching the main character talk with this news guy, but then all of a sudden, the little cable does this weird twist and splits. And then this is when, like, this was the moment when I was like, oh my God, webcomics are going to be really, really cool. And I'm really hard of this because then we've got these two parallel narratives that function as a regular comic, but that cable indicates that we're on two separate narrative threads. So, like, instead of like cutting back and forth like you would on TV, it's simultaneous, yet it's not because of that cable, right? And so then while Zot's saying goodbye to his girlfriend and everything, we see the villain emerge from the water, and then we cut back to Zot having his scene with his lady friend, and then we cut back to the villain climbing onto the beach. You see this? And cutting back and forth with these two parallel lines. And I'm thinking like how this is a kind of a visual way of thinking about these parallel paths that stories can tell in an interactive visual novel, right?
Yeah. And it's really exciting to think about what you can do that's kind of outside of the other formats that are currently available.
Yeah, and it's certainly breaking linear expectations. Where it's like, hey, wait a minute, I'm used to flipping through a book. Very. And I was very. I super dig. I'm not like a post McCloudian like grump or anything. I'm sold. I'm happy to have another cup of McCloud Kool-Aid. It's yummy and informative, and has tons of observations in every sip. But I don't know, just to ruin the metaphor. So anyway, bringing us to sort of to On the Ground, Jersey. All
right, that's what I was asking. I wonder if I needed to cue the music so that we can get a little bit more heavy and serious. Talked about theoretical stuff. Talked about ways of thinking about it. And I'll talk about ways of doing it, because there's probably somebody out there who's like, okay, this is pretty compelling. I might want to try my hand at this visual novel jazz. How do you do it? On the ground, putting stuff into practice. So, Kasey, you write the visual novels. How are you writing this? Are you writing like on a legal pad? Are you doing storyboards? Are you doing full script? Is it some kind of weird combination of going back and forth between all of them?
It's a little bit of everything. Like I mentioned, when planning out the paths themselves, just drawing the structures of the choices on a piece of paper will kind of help keep you in check and make sure you're not getting some weird tangent that's going to go off into the middle of nowhere. But for my practical writing, and this is just for the writing step of it, this isn't for the coding and actually turning it into a game, but for the writing of it, I actually just use Google Drive. There's a couple of other options we've talked about. You could probably use, you could soup to nuts build your game in Twine, but we also talked about using Twine as a rapid prototyping of it and writing the game in there. What I do, and did I ever get video back? Can you see me at all?
No, still can't see you.
Okay. No. I was going to show you a bit of the HustleCat script. But I'm basically I just use Drive, and I use it as sort of an HTML enhanced drive. I have some markup in there that I use for choices. Drive has bookmarks that you can set on a page, and then you can link to the bookmark. So I use bookmarks and links. So it'll say you'll get to a choice structure, and you have to pick one or the other, and you literally click the link in the Drive doc, and it will jump you to that bookmark. So for ease of reading it, that's what I use right now. It's kind of tough because over a certain amount of words, like at a certain word count, the document starts slowing down. So I've had to segment it. The writers on Starfighter had to do the same thing too, and split that into several different documents, because having that much call and answer for the bookmarks kind of slows down the document itself, but that's still fairly manageable. And for the system that I'm using right now, choice-wise, it isn't really an issue. I don't need to hop back and forth as much. To use something more complex, I might have to try something else later. I want to look at Scrivener at some point, which is a novel writing software, novel screenwriting, and see, because I know that there's a lot of markup you can do in Scrivener to jump around as well. I haven't really had any time to kind of explore that option yet, but that is something to consider in the future. But in the meantime, if you're just getting started, the system that I'm using in Drive works really well for me, of just using the bookmarks and using some real basic. I have a key at the top of every document, and it'll say like, well, this in brackets means this, so that you can pull that later. I use like color coding and indentation, so just different ways to denote. My scripts are very colorful.
They look like a Lisa Frank sticker book.
You know, that's my goal. I gotta get more neons in there. But yeah, it's just a way of quickly going through, and then that way we can work on it. And we're kind of a different example, since we're not using the engine that we're using to build HustleCat is not going to be available to the public for a little while. It will be eventually. It's all done in HTML5, but we have a way to import that script in and then sort of take it and then make the game from there. I don't know what the options are for other. I'm sure. I feel like RenPy and things like that have to have some kind of import engine. Like, there's no way that you are just writing the script directly into it. But I have not explored any of those, because I'm lucky enough to know an amazing programmer. Conrad is the best. He's the proprietor of Date-Night-O. And so I have not had to worry about that part myself. But there has to be some way to do that in the popular engines.
Well, I could do some screen sharing to show.
Sure.
I've poked around with Twine a bit. I've not done the kind of sort of any kind of serious output with it. But I wanted to explore it. Just this came up. Oh gosh, and Twine. Owen Jollins is the one who pointed out Twine to me recently, and I know the usual suspects of the leaners are coming up in the show. But this so this is very interesting, and what it is, like Kasey described. I mean, it's an engine, but it's also like this editing environment. That also, as you were hinting at, Kasey, it does have a format that you can do some importing. So I will let me share my correct desktop here. I'll start screen share, and so what I have here first, weirdness. So what's funny is Twine has this quirk. That's fun. Open story. It's on my desktop. Twine test, here we go, and it throws it somewhere else. Here we go. All right, so Twine normally looks like you're kind of an ye olden Windows app kind of thing, yet it has these sort of branching nodes, and you can add another one, and I mean, I totally didn't, so I can double click on it, and it'll pop up sort of some editing things. This is new new way out. And then it's got this tag feature, and then it's got a content window thing in the window. You can do tons of crazy things, and I'm going to give a terrible but hopefully somehow intriguing summary of the different kinds of things you can do, because you could put content in there. Twine is killing me because it keeps closing my document. So if Twine won't cooperate with my demo, I will stop demoing you, Twine.
This is your chance to shine, Twine. Why are you doing this?
Yeah. This is weird. So it's funny because I keep opening the document, and all right, let's try this one more time. And it did it again. That's fun. So all right, the Twine UI. What's funny is there's the windowed version of Twine was working better, Twine also has a web version that you can download and just run it locally. Like you can open like an HTML document in your web browser. It doesn't have to exist on a website, right? So Twine has this online editor, and also if you don't want to or aren't online, you could be using a local thing. Problem is like I did cooler stuff in the windowed one, and now, for example, I did some exporting with it, and it turns into something like this, where
Here, let me pull up what you got.
Where it had let's see, so it had that little start box that you guys might have seen, and then you know there's this content, and in the content I had these choices, which is in actually if you ever edited a wiki, you use like a wiki style link, and it automatically turns it into a link to another chunk of content.
Yeah.
And then in these other chunks of content, they'll have titles, but this title really isn't what's seen by the reader. What they see is like the content and more choices. Now, also, so for fun, I'm trying to see where. Here we go. For my silly story was you enter a room, it looks familiar, yet you need a moment to remember what it's for. Is it for fun or is it for work? Well, see, if you click for work, it actually turns the style of the screen red, and so like you can start to control stuff in the environment. I could have images loaded via a style sheet, and all sorts of stuff that could happen there. If you're comfortable with HTML and CSS. If you're comfortable also with scripting on top of it, so here's the other experiment I did, because I essentially through 1 or 2 evenings I was just kicking the tires on this, saying like, you know, I'm curious if this thing will tempt me into this yet another hobby. But anyway, this custom script, right? So it has a special tag. So these are tags for Twine, and if it has a script tag, here's just me testing, well, can I put any JavaScript in there? And so I just did a little alert, and it says, let's begin. And that script runs when you run your game. You edit your game, you export it, and it's HTML. You open it up on a web browser. You can, you know, put it anywhere, and anyone who can see that can run it.
Yep.
And lastly, here's an example of where where does that style red thing come from? Well, it comes from yet another little chunk of content that has a special tag, right? And actually 2 tags. One of them is style sheet, and the other one is style red, which lets the other well, let's see. Anyway, I'm forgetting which actually causes it to be recognized as style red, but that's how it could even be used by any other chunk of content. So in for work, it uses style red. Style red is now a little CSS, a little cascading
I was
style
going to say,
sheet.
this is very CSS-y.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So if you already know that stuff, Twine lets you reuse that knowledge. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really nice. I played around with Twine a little bit, read some tutorials on it as well. It's actually, if you have a basic understanding of HTML and CSS, which I do from building the websites for my comics, or at least working through them, that probably should give you enough to start a Twine story. Like, you can get more complex from there, but you could do a basic Twine story just by reading the kind of the write-up for it, and then working with what is available there, and then maybe supplementing with a little bit of HTML, CSS, and if you want to get real wild, there's some JavaScript in there. But it's very flexible, and I think it's a good way to start.
And if anybody who's listening or watching and says, like, oh, CSS, whatever, I don't even know what that is, we actually did a whole episode on CSS, episode 20. Rob walked us through a really easy to understand and internalize and put in practice approach to working in HTML and CSS. Do you remember that episode, Rob?
I do.
And it was right after we did that one that I started doing some of my own custom CSS on my Tumblr sites.
Yeah,
like,
that's cool.
I get it
We covered, Tumblr was one of the examples we explored. It was, I mean, I think some of that's probably a little dated, but I think all the principles are there. Where
Yeah.
you have a selector, then you have some instructions that are run via the selector. The selector is a thing that helps you know, like, well, what in the document should be affected, and then the instructions in the selector allow you to then do stuff to the thing that gets affected, like make it bold, make it huge, or make it responsive, like having, relatively, relative sizes, such as using like EMs or percents instead of using pixels, stuff like that. Which I'm guessing is the kinds of things that the engine Kasey's using must be doing, because it's responsive.
So should we talk about some of the other software writing tools that are available out there if you want to do visual novels? Like you kept mentioning, is it RenPy?
RenPy, yeah. Yeah, it's as far as I remember, forgive me, I know somebody is going to correct me on that, but I believe it's written in Python.
I think that's right. I think that's what I was seeing.
And that's where the Pi comes from. I don't think you need to know Python to use it. I hope you don't, because I couldn't even start to try to know Python as far as it goes. I feel like it sounds like it uses sort of a more straightforward interface to get you started. You don't have to just go in there and start coding it directly. Like, I think it's got maybe more of a WYSIWYG editor to it. What you see is what you get.
And it's available for Android as well as desktop applications. That's crazy. So Windows, Mac OS 10, Linux, and Android. That's bonkers.
Yeah. I think the Android must be more recent. Last I had looked into it, I think it was still only PC. So that's pretty cool that they're branching out and getting that into more formats here. I cannot personally speak to this, but this is the most popular engine right now for making visual novels in the West, I guess, outside of Japan. I think Kirikiri is the engine that's used a lot in Japan.
I tried to get the site loaded for that, but I couldn't get it to work.
Yeah.
So the Wikipedia page has information on that. It's Kiri.
Yeah. And I only know of it in name. I don't think there's no English language version of it available. But a lot of really popular games that came from Japan are in the Kirikiri engine. Like Fate Stay Night is a very major example of the visual novel. Sorry, I'm losing my voice apparently. Of visual novels, it's a very large franchise. It's actually a huge game. I think it's something like 900,000 words or something, just completely off the wall like that.
Is that the same as the anime? Fate
Yes.
Stay Night?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The anime was based on it. The anime is sort of an all ages version of it. It is a very adult oriented
it's an
title.
Adult one.
Oh my.
Yeah. So they made the story ended up becoming so popular that they sort of did a toned down version of it when they did the anime, and then they have done all these spin-offs and things like that. It's become a major franchise. But yeah, that was done in Kirikiri and it was done by Type Moon, I think, did it. I don't remember, to be honest with you. But yeah, if you are making a visual novel, you're probably at this point, until there are more options that are more developed, going to do it in RenPy. And that will give you an executable file that people can download and just install on their computer and run from there. Pretty much, I feel like almost all of the Western-made visual novels that are on Steam right now are made in RenPy. I know that the Analog: A Hate Story is a fantastic visual novel, and I know that was made in RenPy. It does have a lot of different elements to it. It's also very flexible in terms of what you can do with it. You can make a very simple
There's one in here on
story.
there's a Renpai game called or novel called Romance Detective Fights Romance Crimes.
That's really cute. That art is really cute too.
Oh, I'm already a fan. Okay, is there any other ones that? Because there was also I found in my limited research on this Nscriptor. You know anything about
I
this?
think Nscriptor I think is older than Kiki, if I'm remembering that correctly, and I think that's another Japan-only engine that was developed. I don't really personally know of any games that were done in this engine. That's something I would have to ask Conrad about that actually.
Okay.
But as far as one that has been used, I don't think there is an English language version available of that. I would have to. I know that there are some smaller, well, not smaller, some up and coming ones that are using different different languages. Like so how Renpai uses Python. There's others that are using. I think I saw a JavaScript-based one. I know the Puzzlecat and Date Night Toast games are built in mostly HTML5, so it's done completely differently with that, and that's how you're able to just load it in the browser and play it like that.
Gotcha. Okay, well,
I wish I could tell you that would be an option, but someday. That'll be another option here, but
well, it seems like there's some options that are fairly user-friendly that we can get to right now. But I want to make sure we have enough time for the final bit of on-the-ground stuff that I had planned, which was tips. You know, like what to expect from this experience, because you're still hot in this experience, Kasey. And I know it's a tremendous amount of work for everybody involved. So here I am. I'm the young. I'm 14-year-old girl coming up to you and going like, "Hi, Ms. Van Hise, I want to do a visual novel myself. What should I prepare myself for? What kind of things should I watch out for? What things would you do differently? What things have you learned from this experience that you would pass on to that young gal who wants to do her own visual novel?"
Get ready to write. You're gonna do a lot of writing, a lot of writing. So
write till you wish you were dead, and then keep going.
You're gonna. I think this is the longest thing I've ever written. I thought I knew about writing from comics, and then I started writing a novel, and you were actually writing a novel. So just keep that in mind. If you're doing everything yourself, don't get overwhelmed. There's a lot of resources out there to help you. If you want to find like a team to work with, then just make sure that that you're all on the same page with what you want of it and what you expect out of it, so you don't get like in that presentation that I had, we did at a convention, there was this scene that...
I'll pull it up.
Okay, I think it's one of the very last ones around teamwork. Yeah, the very, very second to last one there. This could happen to you. Okay. So we have a lady with pink eyes, and the text says her clear blue eyes, they were reflecting the sky. And, like, clearly the artist and the writer did not talk to each other.
Yeah.
So if you're working with other people, just make sure you talk to them. And sooner or later...
A redundancy.
Yeah.
A redundancy.
Yeah. That's my biggest... Visual novels are really, really bad about this, and I cannot stand it. Where it's... Yeah. It's just that right there.
All right, just for the radio. He jabbed his finger. Ha! I jabbed my finger at you, and he's pictured also jabbing his finger. Just for... Sorry for interrupting, but yeah.
No, that's it. Yeah.
Very redundant. Yeah.
Yeah. So just keep the same principles in mind that you would in writing a comic. You are writing in a visual medium still, so just use that. If you're the artist, get your information from the writer early, so you can start uh, just communicate. If you're doing everything yourself, then that's awesome. And yeah, just reach out to people, make friends in the community. It's a very small community right now, but it's growing. It's growing pretty fast. So I'm sure there will be plenty of people who would be willing to help out and to give advice on that. If you are listening to this and you are interested in learning more about it, I'm always happy to tell you about what I'm learning in the process here. I'm still learning, but that's something that I'm super open for. But yeah, don't get overwhelmed. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Like you would with a comic, don't start with your 400-page epic unless you know that you are super ready for it. You can also just do a short game about like a kid walking home from school or something like that. Like just do some short, fun things. You don't have to make these giant choice structures. You don't even have to use choices at all. You can just use it to tell a story from start to finish. And it's just another tool, just like anything else.
Just like how we always talk about mini comics, right? Like
Yes.
If you've
Yeah.
never made a comic before, make a mini comic, because that's going to expose you to the whole process in a much more limited risk way.
Yeah.
Right, and a mini comic, you don't have time, you don't have space to do that big epic story. You have to choose. Like the Captain Cat mini comic that I did is Captain Cat and his friends are on a boat.
Mm-hmm.
The shark attacks the boat, and a bunch more sharks show up. He hits the sharks. They go, oh, and he has to throw his prize fish at the sharks to get them to leave him alone. And then he goes home and he's disappointed. The end. That's not epic. Right?
Yeah.
But it's enough. It's enough to get us through a small narrative arc.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, something where it's like, yeah, if you want to play with choice structure, make something with 3 choices. And
Yeah.
you got that experience now.
Finishing something is an encouraging thing in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. And it might be worth it to, if you're exploring the idea of working with choice structures, it might be worth it to start in Twine before you go even worrying about art assets and things like that, because then you can build a story. You don't need any art in a Twine story. You can just set up a thing, and you can add art if you want to get more complex with it. But you don't need to. You can set up something where it's like Rob did, where you have 2 choices and you can choose one of them and it continues from there.
You have a sandwich. Do you eat it or do you not eat it?
Yeah.
Now I want to know what happens.
Well, the choice is yours.
But Kasey Snipes is in the chat, and he is saying, I've not tried Twine, been fooling around with Adobe Flash for the past few weeks. It may be useful as a creative storytelling tool if someone is more comfortable with Adobe products.
Ooh.
I believe Photoshop also uses a timeline with frames. Now, it does, but I don't know how you would do branching narrative with Photoshop's timeline with frames. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not sure how that would...
I mean, really, all it does, it reminds me of sort of a classic Adobe Flash. Essentially, interactive things were all on the timeline ages ago, right? Now you can do things without the timeline, and so if you're in that mode, you're essentially using it as a you're injecting pauses a lot, basically, or tiny loops where you have a chunk of the movie. And then there's a time to choose, and maybe the time to choose is in a little tiny loop because there's, I don't know, like if there's a bird cleaning its wing or something, and while the bird's cleaning its wing in that tiny loop on your timeline, there's choices or text or what have you, and it's but instead of animating and moving that text, you just leave it still. So of course to the viewer, it's not animated, right, and distracting.
Right. And you use, it's called action scripting. Last time I used Flash. Oh, here's how long it's been since I've used Flash, Rob. It was like Flash 4, I think, is what I last used to make anything. But I remember that you would use action scripting to like jump around to different points in the timeline. So you could create a branching narrative, but it'd be all timeline based with like discrete little chunks in different places that you would either skip over or go back to based on if this then that kind of action script rules, right?
And that's all you need. As soon as you can get control over the timeline, that you have the option to do that. So yes, you could do a branching narrative, because all that would mean then is you're skipping chunks of what you would if you were watching it like a movie linearly. Your interactions are causing that to not happen. So you just pop up along that timeline, and you can do that.
Let's date ourselves even further, Rob. It's like that 8-track robot game. What was that?
2XL. 2XL is awesome. No shame in 2XL.
No. I'm saying that like anybody
I'm old. So what?
Under 35 will not remember 2XL.
What's an 8-track?
Okay, so 2XL, you
look it up while you describe it.
Will you'll thank us for your YouTube adventures you have with enjoying the comedic. Let's see, sort of. Let's see. He had sort of. I'm trying to think of a way to describe his accent. Yes, there he is. So that don't be fooled by the cassette 2XL. You got to go to the 8-track 2XL. Anyway, and what's funny is yes, there's branching narrative going on right here because essentially it's taking advantage of the jumping ability of an 8-track, which I've not studied but have been a user of through 2XL, where he essentially asks a question and then you get the ability to jump to the yes, or if you answered yes, or jump to the no if you answered no. And it's just taking advantage of your the control of a timeline. So it's and it's super engaging.
I love this box where it says caution electric toy.
We needed that because
we did.
Because it was what there was the gas crisis. You'd eat anything. It wasn't nailed down. It was a wild Mad Max era.
And we'll link to it in the show notes, but definitely check out videos of 2XL in action because he has like a very strange way of talking. He doesn't say picture, he says picture. Right?
As a child, I thought he talks like Barry Manilow.
Now I'm really curious.
2XL, he keeps coming up in conversation over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So anyway, that's all. I was reminded of that when we talked about this idea of like a Flash timeline actually being an interactive branch. You could totally do it. And Kasey's saying in the chat, Flash has ActionScript 3 now in HTML5 canvas. So yeah, probably do a lot with it.
Yep.
Maybe I need to dig back into Flash. Oh, but then I have to get Adobe Creative Cloud. I know. It's
gotta get on the cloud.
We're back to the clouds. Different controversy. There's always controversy with the clouds. There's McCloud controversy.
Yeah.
No, you got the Adobe Cloud controversy. I don't know.
All right. Well, we're coming up on the end. Kasey, it's always so great to talk to you, talk with you, and it's always great to just experience the passion and enthusiasm you have. Like I told you when I was in New York, I was like, every time I would come back from an exhausting day at New York Comic Con, I would be up until 1 o'clock in the morning anyway, even though I was physically wiped out, because everything that comes out of Kasey's mouth is like, well, that's something I got to write down. That's something I got to follow up on. Like the Hatsune Miku thing, which I knew very little about. And it was great because I was like, what's Hatsune Miku? And like you and Lindsay and Mike were like, oh. And we went to YouTube and
world.
You're wrapping up, but now you bring up this thing. What's this?
Hatsune Miku?
Yes.
Case.
Oh man, Vocaloids are an episode of themselves, I think.
Yeah, I think.
Hatsune Miku is short version is the mascot for a software called
Vocaloid.
Vocals for and in music composition, and they weren't selling the software super well until they came up with a mascot for it. So they gave a face to the voice, and they made this character named Hatsune Miku, and then she is basically the biggest pop star in Japan right now. And it's all fan-made songs. I don't know how the creative licensing goes for them, but people just make songs and then upload them to the internet.
Whoa.
And
more late.
giant phenomenon.
But yeah, yes, she's a pop star that is created by the fans. And recently in New York City, there was a Hatsune Miku concert where a Hatsune Miku hologram was performing to a packed house. And yeah, it's this whole crazy brave new world of what is fandom, what is creation, and we do need to do an episode on this. Because it's a topic I've been digging at in my on my own for some time now. But for a special treat, if any of you have not seen it yet, go look up the Domino's Pizza Hatsune Miku commercial.
Hatsune Miku.
Yeah, and hearing Lindsay's retelling of the commercial was even better than the commercial. But you can't get that on YouTube. But
we'll try.
It's the Domino's Pizza CEO talking about Hatsune Miku, and it's hysterical.
It's wild, yeah.
Okay.
Hatsune Miku. But anyway, but yes, Kasey, you always come in with just like this tornado of really awesome things to think about. So we love having you on. And where should people go to interact with you more and follow up with you about things like Hustle Cat and things like writing their own visual novels?
I am Space Case on Twitter. You can check out hustlecatgame.com, where we'll have more information up shortly. There's also a Hustle Cat Game Twitter, where we'll be putting official announcements, and you can watch me just barely contain myself and not retweet every cat picture I see. It's really tempting.
Hustle Cat Game on Twitter, yeah.
Yep. You can go to datenaito.com, but yeah, mostly the easiest way to get me is and then there's always wintersinlavelle.com.
Winters in
Huh?
Lavelle.
Yes.
Wintersinlavelle.com is the webcomic. Parasite Nights is the other webcomic, and gorgeous, both of them gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous comics that everybody should read.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, if you, the person watching or listening to this, enjoyed this discussion, something you could do, here's your action item, besides going up and following Kasey on Twitter, Space Case, space as in outer space, Case, K-A-S-E, like Kasey. Hatsune Miku.
Hatsune Miku.
Besides following Kasey on Twitter, great thing you could do to show your appreciation of the show is to go give us a star review on iTunes. You don't even have to write a whole review, just however many stars you think that this episode deserves. But writing a review is also really nice. Then we read them and we feel really good about what we're doing. Or if you're watching this video on YouTube, giving it a thumbs up. That helps more people find the show. But if you are like really into what we're doing, you're like, gosh, these guys bring value week after week after week, and I need to thank them somehow. Go to patreon.com/leanintoart, and that's where you can pledge some money to help us make this thing financially sustainable. And there's extra stuff that we post there, like the extra shows in between the regular Lean Into Art casts, as well as an open mic thread that we open up where we talk with the leaners about whatever they want, but that's a private thing that's only for patrons who support us on Patreon. Did I miss anything, Rob?
No, that's it. It's worth checking out, and hopefully you'll get extra curious and just kind of fall into that, support us button. A lot of good stuff out there, and if you trace back a little bit, you'll see all the things we posted during the super busy month of November. So there's lots of things for you to explore.
Kasey, did we get video back?
Am I here?
Yeah, I see you.
I got kicked out entirely for a second there, but hey.
So you're here for the very
now that the show's over,
time.
you can see me.
And you can see more of Kasey on Twitter at Space Case. So thank you once again, Kasey. Thanks, Rob, for helping me put together a fun show.
Cool. Thanks for putting up with me, Jersey.
There we go. So, okay, until next time, everybody, I have been Jersey Drozd of LeanIntoArt.com and Jersey on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of LeanIntoArt.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at LeanIntoArt.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
And there we go. As Rob likes to say, boom, that's a podcast.
Woo! Yeah!
All right, so cool. Well, we're going to kill the stream, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us and watching and participating. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Yep, thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.